As we enter into the final destination of 2023, we are here today to talk about all different things. But we talk about the struggles. The holidays brings a lot of us struggles, whether it's the family that we're connected to, the people in our lives, or maybe just everything that's happening in the world. But the whole thing that we need to look at is how we connect to those things. What is our ways, our reactions from them? And when we really think back, I want you to look at the ways that your parents dealt with these struggles. Because a lot of times when we look back, it's our parents that have taught us how to react to things. Welcome to Let's Get Real. My name is Glenda Kroll. I am one of your hosts today with my partner beside me, Nicole Harvick. Hello, Nicole. How are you doing?
Hello, my dear. I am good. I made it through the big December storm in South Carolina that just about washed Charleston away. So that was very interesting.
Wow.
We're way out of hurricane season. You know, that ends in late September. But man, we had a whopper the other day. So far, so good with my Wi-Fi. I'm hoping to stay on here right up until 4, which I fully expect. So yeah, so I'm hanging in there, my girl.
Good. Well, and okay, so struggles, right? Like, what is life without struggles?
Yeah.
It's a matter of this is life, but it's how you approach things that really matters.
It really is. And we're going to have struggles, no matter if it's small or if it's large. And, you know, you talked about parents, and I really don't even remember back in the day. I don't remember my parents fighting or how they dealt with things. It always seemed to be a very calm family. But
Wow.
as I looked back and as I got two different opinions, one from my mom, one from my dad, it wasn't nearly as cohesive as it looked from a child's point of view. So that's been a real interesting kind of eye opener now. And then I look back at mine, and here's what's interesting without me knowing is I tried to do the same thing in my family, keep it very cohesive, keep it very calm, when in fact, it didn't serve me at all, as that was external and what was going on internal were two completely different things.
So today we're going to go into a little bit of a deeper dive into it. And we have a lovely guest today that we're bringing back because we connected so well, and she's just really awesome. And we're going to be talking about this. So Nicole, how about introducing our guest today?
Yeah, I would love to. We had a conversation with this gal, I believe about 5 or 6 months ago, that was fascinating. She's a coach with a background in psychology and psychosomatics. She shares her 3D approach to coaching, blending knowledge, intuition, and empathy, which I'm very, very big on that, because that does address the internal. And that's what we so often leave out. It's what's really going on inside of us. So I'm sure she'll have a lot of things to share. And her story is one of resilience and the pursuit of happiness. And I think we can all resonate with that and try to emulate that. So let's welcome Julia Pazmandy to our stage.
Hi, ladies. I'm so happy to be here.
And we're thrilled to have you here. Welcome. And you look like you're somewhere deep down within, a little mysterious, shall we say.
Yeah. She's got the light shining on her, and
you ladies make me blush. Honestly, today, all the odds were against me. Everything from snowstorms to lack of electricity, no Wi-Fi. I mean, I fought it, and here I am. I'm just excited. I have sun in front of me. I have windows to light up this podcast, and I'm just so grateful for you ladies to have me here.
Well, you look like you're lighting up and you're very shiny. So I am thrilled to see that. And so we talked about it. This is part of life. It is the struggles of life. And whoever says that life just flows, it does at times. I can say that for sure. But there also are times when life sort of, what can we say, smacks you in the face. And then you sit back and you go, shit, I didn't see that coming.
I love the honesty. love that, Glenda. Oh, that's brilliant. You know what it is? When Nicole were mentioning her family and her parents, and she said a very interesting thing. She said everything seemed to be nice and quiet and peaceful. And I think that's what happened in the past. Our parents were very good at making it seem like everything okay, and pretending that everything is fine rather than showing us how to deal with certain issues and exposing their vulnerable side and their human side to us as children. And honestly speaking, I'm surprised that the subject of ancestry has been coming up so much, not just in this podcast, but with my clients, with my family members, with just things in general. Random people asking me about my ancestry. And I find it interesting how things tie in, not just in our physical DNA, where we look like our parents, but it's actually in our sort of, say, mental DNA. So most of us, even though we might deny our parents or think we're nothing like them, in reality, we usually follow in their footsteps, just with different decorations.
Yeah, and
Well,
with cellular DNA too, you've got to remember we've got things passed down from us for 7 generations. So we've actually got the cells and the memories, and sometimes we don't even know why we're doing it, because it really didn't start with us. It was passed down so many generations.
and I believe that wholeheartedly, because I'll tell you something. When you say that, my household, bless you, my household was never the one that things were quiet. When there was things happening, yeah, we heard. My mother was very vocal. But here's the thing. First of all, in that generation, we didn't talk about, parents didn't go for schooling to start learning. There was no internet. There was none of this stuff on TV. None of this stuff happened. It wasn't until I think that it was more when I started having children, because I started doing courses and started learning because I wanted to be better than what I grew up as. And the other thing is, as a young child, there were a lot of things that I did not like. And I made note of it in my own self and said, I don't want to be like that when I grow up. I'm going to be different. So there are things out there, and we do make conscious decisions in ourselves, because I did. I don't know where it came from, but it's part of the old soul in me. But there was also a thing of, we do have that inner dialogue, that inner guidance that tells us sometimes right from wrong. There's kids that will go on steal, and you'll ask them why they didn't do it. They know it was wrong, but there was still a thing that they went and they do things, so it's part of that whole thing.
That's so true. And actually, there's an interesting thing I've learned recently, is that usually our financial well-being reflected through our relationship with our father, and our relationship well-being, right? Our marriage, or I don't know, friendships, or just relationships in general, are usually based on our relationship with our mother. Now, the interesting part is, and this is sort of where I want to tie in the ancestry, when I've learned this, and again, this information is somewhat new to me, but I kind of applied it on practice. So I know that what I've learned actually has substance to it. And the explanation behind the bloodlines and how it's interconnected is, if you think about it, when you're in the womb of your mother, you can experience the emotions that she's going through, whether it's anger, whether it's shame, whatever it is. And your mother has experienced the same type of emotions that her mother went through while she was in the womb. So if you try to untie that knot and go generation behind the generation, thinking of what was already in your mother as she was born, that was given to her on the emotional aspect, on the energetical aspect, and then you think of her passing that on to you with her own sort of baggage that she accumulated throughout her life after being born, it all kind of affects us. So the belief behind this is that with generations, if we don't solve certain psychological patterns or issues, or patterns would be, I think, the correct way to stick with, then really they accumulate, and that's the battles that our kids have to fight. And I find that most people are very fast to say that they're nothing like their parents. And I find that working with my clients, it's always on the defense, especially when you're working with somebody who had troubled childhood, who had difficult parents to deal with, who had abusive parents, whether they were abusive physically or mentally or emotionally. And usually those type of emotional traumas, especially when it's not physical, goes unnoticed to a certain degree. But I find that when a person gets challenged by their own children at specific age, those habits or those abusive methods that the parent might have used on them, they still tend to use on their children, but in a different form. And if I may, I'd like to give an example. I had a client who came to me because her father was completely emotionally unavailable to her. And I remember her saying that, you know what, Julia, he was a psychologist. He was working with people, but then anytime I had an issue and I'd come to him for that, he'd just wave it off and be like, go to your room and think about it. Think about your behaviors, think about your problem, but never trying to talk and give her solutions or talk it out with her. And interesting enough, as we're having our session, I hear kind of noise in the background in a different room, and I hear a child sort of kind of crying. So I asked her, I said, oh, is everything okay? Do you need to go see your child? I hear her crying. She goes, no, I just had to pick her up half an hour ago from school right before. She's in her room because she got trouble by her principal. So I told her that she's got to sit in her room and think about her behavior until she comes up with a solution on how to fix it. And then she can come and see me. And I thought to myself, how similar it is in a nutshell to behavior of her father. Now, she didn't see it because the expectation she had of her dad, because her dad was a professional, he was a psychologist. So therefore, her expectation was for him to counsel and be there for her. However, she took that responsibility off of herself, being there for her child, by using reasoning that she's not a professional. But in reality, if we take off the decorations, she was doing exact same thing to her child as was done to her. Absolutely. Just in a different form without even noticing it.
Well, I don't know if that would say, honestly, that it's not always that it's coming through from an interior mode. So what I'm trying to say is this, it's also part of nature versus nurture of situations, right? So if you've grown up with listening to a man who is yelling and screaming and there is no way of talking, or you go into your room, you know, you're going to grow up thinking that's what happens a lot of times is people parent the same way that they were taught, unless unless they go and they seek a difference. Mm-hmm. Unless they have something that has hit them in their lives where they realize that this is not the way I want to be treated. You know,
so true.
And right? I think there's a lot of subconscious parenting too. Yes. Because, you know, that you don't even know some of the things that you're emulating from your parents when you're doing it, because you really don't remember. If you were 4 or 5 years old, you're not going to have that vivid memory, but it's going to be in your subconscious and you're going to repeat it because you don't know where it came from. So you really don't have that, you know, it's in there, but there's no like outer knowledge, like where did that come from? It just happens.
Absolutely. And I was going to say that Glenda is 100% correct. In order to really fix it, a person needs to work on that. But in order to work on something, the person needs to be aware. Exactly. And I guess that's where self-awareness comes in. But going back, most people are really scared to be self-aware because they're worried they will not like the versions of themselves that's been rejected over and over again by wrong people. And yes. That's why I always go back to the basics, that there's so many people that told us what's wrong with us throughout our lives that we start to believe that. And then once we start to believe that there's something wrong with us, we start to adjust and play a role just so we're not ourselves, just so we don't upset people around us. And when we're playing that role, I think that's when we really forget who we truly are. And again, self-awareness is such a difficult subject for most because they're really scared to discover what's inside of them. Because next thing you know, even admitting that you are following the patterns of your parents or your ancestors is actually quite scary when you come to realize it.
But I'm going to interject with something else that I wanted to.
Oh, I love the challenge. I love that, Glenda.
So here's what I'm going to interject with. Not is it only that people are not self-aware. That's another whole thing. And sometimes it's children. But children will often do what they can do to seek attention. So that might be good and that might be no good. And I know that for a fact because it depends also on the ladder of where you were born. If you have, in my situation, I grew up in a family where there was a lot of needs. I didn't have the needs. I was pushed off to the side. So I was a little bit of a troublemaking kid because that was the only way I sort of seemed to get attention.
Well, that's because your needs were neglected. Like you said, there was so many people.
Not neglected. I don't know if I would use the word neglected because my needs were met to a point.
Okay.
But I'm just saying when children, it's not that they are not at an early age, you're very not going to be self-aware. You're just going to know what makes you feel good, right? It all starts with feelings. It's children don't know to be aware that, it's like, I don't like the way daddy talks to me. Like, I don't like the way daddy yells. It doesn't make me feel good. I like when mommy and daddy are happy with me because that makes me feel good. So maybe I should do more of this and not do more of that. That's as down as simple as it really starts.
But you see, that's the battle that I'm talking about, that the generations did not fight. So again, you became self-aware from the child that weren't really taught to be self-aware. And therefore, now your children will not suffer the way you did. But the reason you had to go through that difficulty and weren't able to embrace who you were is I'm pretty sure that your parents didn't embrace who they were. So they couldn't lead by example. So when the parents, No,
I don't agree with that. I think that I had to make my voice known. For whatever reason, as a young child, I was very much out there. So I made myself known. My parents were not like me. I was very different from everybody in my family. I don't know where this came from. It was my way of handling, not getting the same attention. So I put myself out there more than a lot of the other kids.
That question, Glenda, might it have been a thirst for experience? Because going back to the concept that our soul comes here for experience, maybe your soul wanted more than what most of us do.
I think I was brought here for several reasons. I definitely do because of I'm some of the things that I've gone through and have dealt with are crazy, like just crazy stories that that I haven't shared all around. But it's part of my voice, my body. Like even if I wanted to deplete myself into a corner and hide and fade, I never could. Even as a young child, I was all through school, I was the biggest kid in the class.
You're the fighter. I love the fire inside you.
To melt down, I couldn't. So what I'm saying though is, as children, when you look at them, it all starts on, and I really believe this is true, on of what they feel. And sometimes they feel that they want to get that acknowledgement, and it might be they have to do bad things to get that.
Ooh, now let me ask you this. You see, my husband and I had a discussion about it the other day, and he asked me, he said, like sometimes I don't understand why our kids act out. And when I say act out, sometimes they get whiny, they're kids, it happens. And I told him that my theory going about it is that, yes, they're looking for attention. And sometimes they look for that attention through negative ways. However, that's where unconditional love comes in. And I believe in some sort of way, it's the test for the parents, for that unconditional love, that even when the child acts out, you still choose to love them. So now when my kids, and I mean, it's been a while, like few months since we had any acting out episodes. But I remember the last one when we had, and my son kind of was having his little meltdown. And I remember just hugging him and telling him that it's okay. If you want to have your meltdown, I'll be here and I'll still love you. And I remember he goes, really, Mom, you love me even when I'm grumpy? And I told him, I love you no matter what, because that's what unconditional love is. I love you even if you won't love me. I will still love you till the day I die. And I think that maybe that's what put it to rest. And I'm hoping that that solved the issue. But part of me wonders if acting out is a way to prove yourself that you can be loved unconditionally.
Well, first of all, how old are your children?
13, 14, 15.
Okay,
Oh, wow.
so you got ways to go, sweetheart.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, if you think this is just going to be solved, and I'm going to be telling you really straight up flat, you ain't seen nothing yet. You're just getting into the teen years.
We think that little baby's so hard, and the minute they're like, they start that independence, you know, your heart drops to your toes, and man, it's crazy. It just sometimes, not always, you know, mine had their moments that are real good, real bad, but you know, and I always have told my kids, I don't own you. I don't own you. You're an individual. I said, I have to keep you alive at least until you're 18. So there's some things I'm going to say no. There's some things you're going to, you know, I'm going to have to come search you down and find you and pull you out of situations. I will do it. And, you know, so yeah, it's hard, isn't it, Glenda?
So I'm going to share a story that I've really never put out there before. Ooh. And it's going to tell you about unconditional love and how a parent can be challenged, but how, as a parent, the greatest thing that you can do sometimes is to really sit back and bite your tongue. So a week to the day that my son turned 18, my kid was very much a mama's boy all through his life, and a very brilliant kid, but had a lot of problems along the way because of a very turmoil relationship with my ex-husband. Mm-hmm. And on top of it, there was a lot of health issues that went through, and my kids really suffered through a lot of that. Anyways, the week after my son turned 18, the kid who never left home didn't come home from school. And I was left with a voice message that I didn't find for a few hours later when I only lived 3 minutes from school. That night we were supposed to have I was supposed to go to the theater. We had tickets, and I told my kids to come home straight from school so I could give them dinner and everything. And it was now 5 o'clock and he's not showing up yet. And school ended at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I went running, and short story fine, I find out that as when I finally listened to the machine and I called the school and all the rest of it, he was actually on his way on a plane and going off to Louisiana.
Wow, surprise! Wow. I was expecting any turn of event, but not this one. Oh my God. Oh my God. Wow, what a surprise.
Hours of being tormented and not knowing what to do. And not, this was so blown away out of the left field. And he had formed a relationship with somebody and ended up in Louisiana. And many, many hours later, was probably about 10 o'clock at night when he phoned me to tell me he had actually landed safe and to tell me, that where he was. And, by that point in time, I had already cried and screamed and phoned the police, and I had done everything. So my energy level was below zero. And he was shocked when I said, okay, I'm glad you phoned home. I'm glad you're okay. Okay. Hopefully that you'll just stay in touch. 6 months went by that every single week he did phone home. Every single week he checked in. The sad part, which really bothered me more than anything, is he was a high school dropout at that point. He left school. It was March, and he didn't finish his high school and get his diploma. And this kid sort of thought at that point he was brilliant. What's he doing with his life? And I let it be. And so the thing is the relationship, because I did not sit there and I didn't scream at him. I tried to understand him. The relationship stayed open through that entire time. Now, needless to say, through that time, I did my own research and only thing. I'm really quite good at investigating, and I found it exactly where he had went to. And I did show up on the doorstep 2 weeks before schools to begin to hand him a plane ticket to say, at least come home and get your high school diploma. And yes, he did come back. And this is a very short version. But the moral of the story was the fact that he didn't get lectured. I told him I was disappointed in him because, of how things, but he said to me, be honest with you, Mom, if I told you I wanted to go and I wanted to take off, would you have stood my way? You probably would have taken my passport. And I said, yeah, that's probably true.
Oh, that's funny.
But the conversation went that even at the age of 18 years old, the one thing that I constantly told him every single time that he phoned me was that the door was always open, that this will always be his home. I will always be your mom. I will always love you. I might not like what you do, and I don't, but I will always love you and be here for you till the day I die. That message was ingrained. Today, he's 35 years old. He's a partner in a law firm. He's doing sensationally well with his life. And we still have a dynamic relationship.
Love that. I love that for you, Glenda. That's beautiful.
But the story is when we talk about our children and we talk about life, it's instead of, like the ways that we could deal with things. Like I think of this because I always have challenges in my life. My life is very much involved with very many people because of my family's dynamics. And there's always challenges. But instead of taking off and flipping out about the things, we need to step back. We need to bite our tongues for 5 minutes and sort of look at the point of where we want to be. You see, my dream was always to have a family that was connected. A family that when the chips came down, that they were always there.
Oh,
A family that there was always love and support, because I didn't always feel that. Yes, there was love, but I didn't always feel that support. That's where things come into. And I believe when we are good parents and we can show those things, and I see it in my own children now that are no longer children, that are full adults, that everything that I wanted, because I led that way, is what I'm receiving now.
I love that. I love that for you, Glenda.
But what I'm saying there for other parents, for other people, is it's not just of accepting of what we were born with. We can come out from what we were born under. It is part of what is not just inside of us, but what is taught to us outside of us and what is spoken to us throughout our lives.
That's so true. That's beautiful. And that's such a beautiful story. It's funny that he told you that he didn't want to ask your permission first, because there's a post I made explaining that to most people, it's easier to say sorry rather than to ask permission. Because if you ask permission and you hear a no, then it's hard for you to disobey. So people that are very obedient or have that in them, they tend to disobey and then just apologize after.
And that was
so.
me.
But you know what it is? I have to say, good for him for taking a chance, and good for you for being supportive and showing him that unconditional love, because you've done exactly what I preach for. And this is beautiful. I love that for you.
So it's also of knowing and being who you know that you are. Like when you know that I rather, instead of sitting there, I rather come with a full heart than come back with lectures. We can talk about things, and that's what, even coming on here and doing this, it's about talking about things. It's
True.
about coming through and allowing someone to be their real self.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And you know what? If I may ask, Nicole, you have a daughter, and I remember last time you mentioned the beautiful experience you guys had. I'm sure that you had a chance to show your unconditional love. Do you have a story you'd love to share with us?
Well, I'll be very honest. My daughter and I, my oldest daughter and I, had a falling out a couple months ago. We had a huge misunderstanding, and also with my dad, she had a misunderstanding. So she picked up and moved back to Arizona, and she actually deleted me off her social media. And I thought, okay, but that's what she has to do at this point. And I know there were times in my life when I was that age, it's 29 sounds like an adult, but it depends on what you've had to do, where you've come, what steps you've
Life
walked.
experiences.
Exactly. And what you've retained from it. And so being a mother, no matter, you can be cut off, and I don't take anything personally, because what's going on is deep within inside of her. So it's not a reflection of me. It's a reflection of how she perceived certain things. And instead of maybe look in a mirror and see that all of us played a part in it, because if there's three people, there's three opinions, there's three ways to do things, there's three ideas.
100%.
Yeah, and she chose not to at that point, and that's fine, because you can either go that way your whole life, or you can just look at something and say, maybe I should kind of look at me, or look inside of me, because she keeps moving, and no matter where she moves, she ends up with herself. So, a place can't make you happy. A house can't make you happy. You have to go inside. Everything is internal. Everything, every answer to every question, every feeling, everything's inside. And so right now, all I do is when I keep in touch with her. I said, you should make a road trip back out here. I'll send her things. Of course, I sent her Christmas gifts, but I'm not going to push her into anything she's not ready to do yet, because it won't be received. And there's going to come a time when there's going to be such a cohesiveness. And even if there's never an I'm sorry, I'm not concerned about things like that, because sometimes words are very, very hollow. You have to look for intention behind it. And, just like her saying, well, maybe I'll make a road trip out there. That's wonderful to me. Am I going to bring it up? No, I don't have to rehash things. Sometimes things are better left unsaid if there's kind of a quiet understanding. And so is it going well with her? We're going to get there. Now, my other one and I, because of something my older one did, she was supposed to go for 5 days with her sister to Kentucky. And that didn't happen because my oldest daughter backed out at the very last minute on her. And she called me just in tears. And she's like, Mom, everything, I can't get refunds. I can't do anything. She goes, she just bailed on me. And as the universe does, I looked on my schedule. I had 2 commitments on a Monday back to back. So I said, look, you're not going to believe this, but I can make this. And yeah, I know. So I spent 5 days with her, bonding a little more, because she's always felt that the older one was my favorite. And I tried to explain, I said, no, I love you both so much. I said, you're very different people. I said, what I love about you, she doesn't have. What I love about her, you don't have. But I love you both equally. And I have so much fun with you. You're just different. And so we spent that time together, laughing, walking, talking, a concert, dinners. And it's almost as if that was inserted into our situation to bond us a little more. And I know the time will come when we'll be able to settle our differences with my older one. And to me, that's just part of life.
That's just part of life and part of parenting.
And I don't get upset. I don't call her out. I don't say, well, you need to look at yourself, because that will do no good. That's just my opinion, because I've had to look at myself a lot in my life also. And when you do the dark night of the soul and you do your mirror work, and it's like that reflection is right back at you, you start learning some very deep truths about yourself, And so will there come a day? You don't know.
Yeah, I love how wise you are and patient and just very wholesome. The way you handled the situation is just so beautifully. I mean, both of you ladies standing ovations. I mean, bravo.
You grew up in a very different world, a different, because you were born in, sorry, what was it, Russia?
Siberia.
Yeah.
Growing up in that, very different from coming here. What was your family like at that point? First of all, how old were you when you left?
Well, my parents first moved to Europe. It was France, then Spain, then Cyprus. They sort of traveled all over the place until they settled in Montreal in 2001. And then in 2003, we finally moved to Toronto. Surprisingly, yes, there is a lot of cultural differences. But I think when it comes to troubled teenage years or difficulty communicating with your parents or parents not being, self-aware, I think it happens in most cultures and in any cities. And yes, perhaps in third world countries or regions, it's less developed because there is shortage of internet. I mean, I didn't know that internet existed until, pretty much when I came to Canada.
Oh, wow.
There was no access. In Siberia back in the days, there was no even computers. I didn't know things like that existed. So, of course, education and self-awareness tools weren't there. However, looking and working with people worldwide, I see similar traumas. I see similar life paths, whether it's, heartbreak in a relationship, whether it's betrayals, whether it's abusive parenting on the father's side, on the mother's side. I mean, honestly, it does look alike to a certain degree. And I remember when I was taking the course on ancestry, there was a partial meditation where the speaker asked to close your eyes and imagine your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. And now as you're visualizing, to look at them just as people. Did they had a heartbreak? Did somebody cheat on them? Did somebody leave them? Did somebody betray them? Did they had a best friend who did them wrong? Did they had a business partner or work partner that stole their work? And really, once you start digging it apart, you realize that your mother had the same relationship issues that you might be going through. And your grandmother had that. And just because everybody kept it on down low and hush hush doesn't mean that it wasn't happening. And it might seem like it's happening on a different scale, but it still does. And I think that's an important thing to remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just because things are happening now, people stayed in relationships in those days more so, and being miserable, they were in unhappy homes and relationships. Some people did go through a divorce or maybe just split. But it's not as if we just invented divorce. It didn't just start in the in the 2000s or so on. It's happened all through the years.
Yeah, and you know what? People did things out of obligation more so back then than now, because they were very limited with their options. I remember a different client of mine mentioning her mother, and she was very resentful towards her mother for staying with her dad when he was so openly was unfaithful to her. Yeah. And I remember her saying, I just can't understand her. I can't respect her because she stayed with a man that was doing her wrong.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, her relationship with her husband, and that was the reason why she came to me, was on the rocks because he was never home. And yes, maybe he wasn't with another woman, but he wasn't available, just like her father wasn't available to her mother. And when I made her see that, yes, the decorations might be different, but her mother might have been staying with her father because she didn't see another choice, just like my client, she didn't see the choice with her husband. And just like she thinks it's okay for him to be home once every 6 months and she's tolerating it, I explained to her that maybe her mother was tolerating that too. So how can you disrespect or not have respect for somebody who struggled, who was hurt emotionally, who had heartache in their heart, just like you are? And I think that when people really analyze that and really look at their parents, grandparents as just human beings that had those struggles, people borrowed money from them and they didn't return it. They struggled financially. They had times when they had to change a job. They had times when they didn't know how they're going to make a paycheck and pay rent. There were times when their spouse didn't want to talk to them or refuse them or whatever it might be that we are going through. Our ancestors went through exact same thing. It might have looked different to us just because from the outside things always look different.
Yeah. And we choose how to view it. We choose, you know, how we're seeing it. And it might not be the same way it's really playing out in someone else's life, our opinion or how we're looking at it. And that's why, you know, I really teach people not to judge, you know, just don't judge.
I think
know.
about relationships as well. I think we tend to put people on pedestals. And when you put somebody up on a pedestal, you don't see them with their flaws. You know, we look at the stars. You go to the people in Hollywood and you're all looking at them of, you know, how they're not even human the way some people book. Well, you know what? They still go to the toilet the same way you do. They still put their pants on the same way that you do. They're just human beings. They're just maybe more known. But that's the problem is, you know, when we start looking at people or our parents or that, and we put them up on pedestals, then we're not really looking things in the clear view of what we need to, you know, how we need to just allow them to understand of who they are and what they've gone through in their own lives.
100%. And you know what? I think that's the easiest way to process or understand somebody is to put yourself in their position. And I have a really good example of that. Again, I love using my friends or my clients as examples just because there's so many of them and they're very self-explanatory. But I remember working with a lady on her connection with her dad, who were unfortunately absent for most part of her life. So she tells me how after reconnecting about a month into their reconnected relationship, she was in her 20s. She told her dad that she wanted to go to a special restaurant because they, I guess, had some special dish there that she wanted to try, and she wanted things to be special. And when she told her dad, and as she explained to me, you know, I knew my dad could afford it. But unfortunately, he told her no. He felt that the pricing at that restaurant was ridiculous. And even though he could afford it, he felt that it was unreasonable. And I remember her being very upset about it and saying, you know, I just don't get my dad. He haven't seen me for over 15 years. And here we are. And he just doesn't want to make an effort. But I know that it's not about money. He just doesn't care about what's important to me. And she has an 11-year-old boy. And I remember asking her, I said, let me ask you this question. Have you ever went with your son to a store and he wanted a toy that you could afford, but you thought that it was absolutely useless, so you didn't buy it to him? And she laughs and she's like, Julia, I see where you're going with it. Yes, I did, but this is different. I said, no. This is not different. Let's dissect it. Your son wanted something that you could afford. But in your mind, it wasn't worth it. In your mind, you explained it to yourself that he has lots of other cars and lots of other toys, and this is an extra car, and you don't see the point. I said the same thing with your father. Maybe you had an idea of going to this fancy restaurant, and meanwhile, he wanted to cook you a homemade meal, and he wanted to invite you and show you his place and his house and introduce you to his family. I said, just because you think that you had a reasoning to say no, doesn't mean that he didn't have the reasoning to say no. He had exact same reasoning. So I find that if you take something that you don't like about your parents and you truly be honest with yourself, if there's any way you have done it in the past, somehow in any variation, you will find that yes, you've done it. And if you take the motive behind your action and apply it to the action of your parent, you will understand their motive. And maybe it's not the same motive as yours, but at least you'll be able to understand them, forgive them, and let go. And I think that's the only way to move on.
And I agree with you 100%, because I think that's the, we started the show off about struggles. And, part of the thing about relationship is there's a lot of struggles, especially if you have a parent who didn't bring you up the way you think you should have, or didn't give you what you should have. And everybody has these and holds on to these angers and grudges and that. But if you sit back, and I have a client, the exact same situation of claimed of what she went through with her mother, and then when we went back, you look at her history, look at where she came from, look at what she's been through. When you do that, you can have more of an understanding. It's a best way of forgiveness.
So true. So true. Forgiveness have no room for judgment. The moment you judge somebody and say they could have done it better, how do you know they could have done it better? How do you know that they haven't done their best? Just because their best is not good enough for you, doesn't mean they haven't tried. Even an abusive parent, in their mind, they still love their child. I always joke and say, it's like Karen. Karen doesn't know she's a Karen. Karen thinks she's saving the world. It's like, and pardon my French, an asshole doesn't know he's an ass. He thinks he's just defending his rights and standing his boundaries. But that's not true. But unfortunately, people are blind and oblivious to their own faults. And it's much easier to see them in others.
Yeah.
Yes, so true. And it makes life so much better if we can sit back. And it's really important when you hold a lot of anger in your heart to sit back and just look at where somebody has come from and how different life was from where we are now to when they were growing up in those years, different worlds.
Oh, 100%. And you know what it is? I find that most people don't try to recognize where the anger is truly coming from, because it's so easy to be upset with somebody thinking, again, going back to that they could have done it better, but really not giving them the gratitude for what they've already done. And I think that's the biggest part and the important part that people miss.
Yeah, or the struggles that they have gone through in their own lives and their own selves. Like nobody knows the internal struggles that everybody else goes through.
100%. And I think only by recognizing that and really trying to learn what the other person is going through, you can try to finally understand their motives. Another thing I find very fascinating is that when something triggers us in other people, one thing to remember is that it only triggers us because we have it in us. We cannot notice something in somebody else if we don't have it. So if our parents are still triggering us, if we still have the beef or the problem with our parents, that's how you know that there's still things within you have to work on. Because I find that only when you're truly at peace with everyone around you and you're truly getting zero triggers from your social circles, that's when you can say, you know what, I feel that I've healed. But until that point, I think that judgment has no place. Because if you're judging, guess what? You're seeing it, that means you have it.
Interesting. And Julia, I have a question for you. I see that you've got the secrets of a third dimensional approach to navigating life's struggles. How do you explain third dimension?
So usually when I refer to my work as 3D,
Mhm.
I use it not in the sense of the dimension, which I will come back because I love that question. It's more in the sense that I use a multiple approach. So usually a person can go see a psychologist, right, to work on their traumas. Then they can go see a Reiki guru and work on their energies and the energy balance. Then they can go to some psyche to predict their future so they can build their plan, and they can hit it off with a spiritual healing, or going to the church or talking to somebody about spirituality. However, with me, you kind of get all four at once. Because I approach everybody individually and I approach everybody from all angles. However, when it comes to third dimension, the fifth dimension, the transition that's been happening, I love the science between quantum physics and this whole quantum jump that the Earth was going through. And between you and I find that this whole transition from 3D to 5D in terms of a dimension, it's sort of comes out in a way where our senses are becoming more open. And I'll explain you how I see it. So 3D for me is when we can see things, we can touch things, we can taste things. But if you think about it, people in 3D matrix, a three-dimensional world, not necessarily intuitive. They cannot see future, they cannot see auras, they cannot see energies, they cannot understand any of that. And that's why, I don't know if you've heard of Dolores Cannon, she talks a lot about third dimensional world, and that's where we lived in. And as of, I believe, 2004, she said the transition started to happen. And in 2020, the Grand Awakening happened. And 2021, that's when people start looking into self-awareness, self-love. 2022 brought careers. 2023 brought ancestry and working through with traumas and healing. Because the 2024 is the year of 8, a year of infinity. So there's a lot of belief that that's the year where all the karma comes back and everything gets settled. And that's when the true 5D awakening happens with the world. And the 5D comes in the sense that people will start seeing auras. People will start noticing energy shifts. I mean, even my grandmother, who's 86, and she denied that energies existed till she was blue in the face about 5 years ago. Literally the other day, she goes, Julia, I come into the store and I feel the energy is off. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yay. Yeah.
Years later, you're finally starting to see and notice energies. But again, that's something very new to new generation, to old generation. But funny enough, people, all ages are starting to feel it. Kids talk about energies. Grown-ups talk about energies, elderly people talk about energies, people all over. And I think that's what the true 5D awakening is that we start using our other senses. We start seeing things that were only available to selective few before. And that's why nowadays, people are more self-aware even on their own. Where before, unless you have a coach or guru by your side, it's really was mission impossible. Nowadays, yes, you can say there is a lot of materials out there, but I also feel that the awakening happening within people's hearts and souls, because what they're describing, even intuition itself, is a feeling that's coming from within us. And I think it's beautiful. I love the transition. I embrace it.
So do I. Yeah. It's time. Not everybody gets to go though. So it's going to be interesting.
Well, you know what? I find that the gap is just going to amplify, because if you think about it, everything's going to separate on vibrations, high vibrations and low vibrations.
And that's where we're at now.
Yes. And if you think about low vibrations is vibrations of fear, anxiety, anxiousness, basically all the negative things that humanity is experiencing. And then you have the other aspect of people that kind of got the memo and they're like, okay, I got to keep my vibrations high. I got to be grateful. I got to think positive. I got to think with love. And those are the people that are trying to stay above the flow. But then again, the people that are on the downscale, let's say on the lower vibrations, they're looking at the people on the high vibrations. And unfortunately, that gap is going to grow because they're becoming more bitter. Because as they're seeing others succeed, they're not grasping the point of it. And the bitterness amplifies. So their vibrations keep going down, the disasters that keep happening, and that gap is just growing, growing, growing until I do believe there's going to be a final point where all sort of those troublesome times will eventually end. And as Dolores Cannon predicts, 1,000 years of peace will be upon us. I'm a strong believer. I have strong faith.
Good.
And yeah, I think eventually people that cannot catch up with higher vibrations will, as awful as it sounds, die off through diseases, illnesses, wars, disasters, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully there'll be a good cleansing so it brings out some positive vibes to everybody, because that's what our world really does need.
100%, 100%. And I think that's why spreading the joy and the positivity is very important. I've had few comments and people mentioning, Julie, keep saying it's happy Monday, happy Tuesday, but people are dying. And I understand. And honestly, it's very hard to see. But I cannot stop the killing. But what I can do is I can empower positivity. I can make extra people smile. I can spread the positive energy. And that's my contribution to outweigh the negative out there rather than supporting it.
I love it. And it's true. That's I'm totally 100% with you with that. I believe that's what our world needs more of. And it's just so much easier to start your day with being happy than it is to be miserable.
Oh, 100%. Most people, it's easier. For some, it's easier to be bitter rather than better. And I think that's where, again, I applaud you both. When Nicole was saying that she's not going to bring up the issue to her daughter and kind of going to let it go and just let her have this one, I thought to myself, good for you, Nicole. You're being better. You're not being bitter. Instead of, trying to prove a point and stick it to her and, doing... Good for you. Good for you. I love that. I love that for you, ladies. You are such a wonderful human beings. And honestly, that gratitude, love, gratefulness, and peace beaming through both of you. And I love it. Love it, love it, love it.
Well, we're in a world right now where there's a lot going on, and we got to come together with gratitude and with some gratefulness, and showing that there is love does conquer it. It's being angry and being hostile and hurting others is not the way to survive through life.
No, absolutely.
100%. Hurting others will not make you feel any better. That's the thing. I always say that resentment or anger or vengeance, that's like drinking poison, thinking that it will kill somebody else. No, it is killing you. And I think that's why forgiveness is so important. But again, in order to forgive, I kind of want to tie it back in around, is we got to recognize that what we're seeing in the other person, be that our spouse, our parents, our children, that we have that too. That's why we notice, recognize the motive, understand the motive of the other person, and let it go. Because honestly, I feel that the only way to live a wholesome, soulful life is through love. Through spreading love, through showing unconditional love, through patience, because, well, love is kind, love is patient, and love is joyful. And I think it's important to remember that.
Compassion is a beautiful word, and it means more than most people can realize. Well, unfortunately, we're getting already to the end of the hour, and it's just crazy how fast it just goes by.
No.
There's too many more things to talk about, but let's wind it up. If somebody is watching and they're struggling through, what magic words can you tell them?
Please know that there's nothing wrong with you. For everybody out there who's struggling, it's usually because you think you can be better, you can do better, you could have done better, you could have done it differently. The answer is no, you couldn't. At that point of time, you've done your best and you've got to come to terms with it. You've got to let it go and just try your best moving forward. And everything in life is a lesson and a learning curve. And as long as you embrace it, you will always come on top, because it's important to stay positive, and because that's the fuel to happiness. Positivity, for sure.
Love it. Thank you. Nicole, what are your wise words for the moment?
Well, I want to expound on these dimensional frequencies, and what is happening right here, right now in this division. The earth is actually upgrading her frequency. She put a call out many thousands of years ago because she was being destroyed. And they say that it was the most sad and pathetic plea they'd ever heard. And we have many people you can call me crazy, whatever. We have help coming in from other dimensions to clean her up. And this is the first time ever that a planet has ascended and allowed her people to go with her. Some are going to go, some are going to stay. And what you're going to see right now is you're going to see a bigger division between those of us that keep our vibration very high. We're very patient with people. We're very kind. We're loving. And you're going to see the people that are going to resonate with hate, with fear, with anger. There's a huge disparity and shame that vibrates at 20, love that vibrates at 500. I'm going to choose the 500. I'm also going to realize that we're at a point in time, those people chose to come here in that frequency. They're going to go back in that frequency. We can't do anything about it right now. But what we can do is just keep our vibration up, and we don't mesh. They don't see us. We don't see them. So for me, if someone says something, it doesn't mean anything to me. It's not about me. It's about them. And it just helps so much for me, instead of arguing or fighting, bantering about certain things. Just let it go. The release and the surrender will do you far more good than the banter and the argument.
I love that. That is so true. I love that, love that, love that.
Thank you. Thank
Oh,
you.
that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you.
Beautiful. And it's true. So if you're sitting back and you're not happy to where you are, it's time to just step back and resign yourself to that you've done the best that you could have done under the situations that you're living. It's time now to surrender. The year is coming to an end, and it's time to move forward and start taking what you can, the good. Remember, when you're leaving 2023, it's time to pack your bags. And remember, in our bags, there's only so much we can carry. So get rid of the anger, the hatred, leave that behind, and pack in your compassion, your love, your understanding, and just realize that you can do the best that you can do under who you are.
I love that.
For joining us today. Julia, thank you so much for joining us on another session of Let's Get Real. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you all the best for the holiday season. To both of you, I send love and light out to you all. And remember,
thank you, lady.
Share this, share it to others that need to hear it. And remember, pick out who you're going to hang around, who is going to bring out the best soul in you.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
I send you all love and light and all the best for the holidays. And until next week, it's time to Let's Get Real. Bye for now.
Cheers.